Doldonk! I've always loved mermaids, and as a kid, I would splash around in the pool pretending I had a tail fin. So I thought, why not take my love of mermaids and create a doll? I wanted something that strayed a bit from the bright-colored, bubbly versions I had seen in cartoons and movies growing up. Then I came across Siren on Hulu. The mermaids in the show were fierce hunters, and they had a darker siren side to them, which I loved. This inspired me to create a character not only beautiful, but also fierce and mysterious. One that could lure anyone in with her enchanting song. So let's dive in and create a siren. I started out by making a wig cap. For this I used stretchy fabric, secured over the head, then hardened it with multiple layers of glue. For the wefts, I chose yarn mixed with deep blues, greens, and black. It reminded me of the depths of the ocean. I worked from the base of the neck up until I got closer to the part. Originally I had made braids for this wig, but in the end chose to remove them. I didn't like how bulky it made her hair. When I got to the part, I laid down a line of glue and placed the weft in the opposite direction of what I had been laying them down in. Then continue adding wefts. I had really hoped the braids would work, but I just feel like they're too chunky. Use good old plastic film to make your hair lay flatter. Now a little body modification. So I took off the feet with a jeweler's saw and sanded them down. But I noticed when I went to bend the legs, the knees would jut out instead of staying forward. To correct this, I just used some sandpaper and filed down the inside of her calves. I learned how to make a pattern for the tail from the YouTube channel AkameruKawaii. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. A link to her video will be down in the description. Once the main part of the tail pattern was finished, I sketched out and made patterns for the fins. Now I folded the paper in half and cut out each fin to make them as symmetrical as possible. I placed the pattern pieces under the plexiglass on my desk, and then with a makeup sponge stippled on thin layers of latex. It took several layers to get the thickness I wanted. The makeup sponge allowed me to get texture for the fins and scales. I wanted her tail to look weathered and natural. Once the layers were completely dried, I traced out my fins, so it'd make cutting them out a whole lot easier. Now baby powder will become your best friend. I've used latex in the past for special effects makeup, and you need some sort of powder to keep it from sticking to itself. My favorite is just baby powder. Once I removed my rectangle of latex, I used pinking shears to cut out strips. You can use any type of sewing or craft shears you like, depending on what shape you want your scales to be. I just went with the pinking shears because they gave me the jagged sawtooth look I wanted. With additional latex, glue down your scales row by row. I tried to offset each row, giving it more of a fish scale look. I also used these same scales on her chest. For the seam allowance, after you peeled up your finished scales, lay down a couple more layers of latex. This keeps it thin so the seam of your tail won't be so bulky. Now I use the latex sticking to itself to my advantage. And dab, 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 some more latex on, just to blend those scales right into her skin. I want it to look more like her scales are a part of her instead of just clothing. Now I began wrapping the tail around her legs, securing the seam with more latex. Sometimes I used rubber bands and binder clips to hold it in place. As you work up the tail, add the additional fins. While her tail was drying, I decided to make a net piece to wrap around her hips. I used a bit of wax thread that I unraveled. I secured it down to this piece of cardboard so it'd be easier to see against the table. I decided the length of my net and then doubled it for the string I needed. Fold the string in half and loop it over the top row of thread, stringing the ends through that loop and pulling it tight. For the diamonds of the net, you'll skip the first string, then take your next two strings and tie them together in a knot. Continue this across the whole net and try to keep your diamonds as even as possible. I ended up making a few cuts to give my net a different shape. Once the tail was dry, I added a layer of gray soft pastels to take away some of the yellow from the latex. My Siren needed some gills. I've seen Dollightful use epoxy sculpt many times to modify the body of her dolls, so I decided why not give it a try. You don't always need professional sculpting tools. Sometimes a little butter knife will do. If mermaids were real, what do you think they'd be like? Leave a comment down below. I used just a little bit of water to help smooth the sculpt. I also sculpted a few little accessories for her headpiece and net. When the epoxy had cured, I sprayed the whole body with a layer of Mr. Super Clear and then laid down a light wash of skin color, slowly building it up to help avoid any streaks being left from the brush. Then I blushed with a little more soft pastels before adding watered down white acrylic paint to some areas of the tail and fins. Then with more acrylics, I brushed on her scale colors. I used blues and greens to match her hair. I tried to work quickly so the acrylics would stay wet and blend easier, giving me nice gradients. Her scales were a little more brighter than what I wanted. So with black watered down acrylic paint, I created a wash, being careful not to let it get onto her skin too much. If any does get on the skin, just remove it with a cotton swab. Once the wash was dry, I used soft pastels to blend the transition from the skin to the scales. I even added a little more green back into the tail. I applied some pink and purple soft pastels to give her gills a little more depth. The pastels didn't work as well as I wanted to as far as transitioning the skin and the scales, so a makeup sponge and acrylic paint did the trick. I used watercolor pencils to add some detailing to the fins. With blue acrylic paint, I gave her some scale variation, and then dry brushed a bronze paint onto the scales to give them a little bit of a shimmer. I used the same acrylic wash that I used on the body on the face. Then began contouring with soft pastels. I chose a soft pink for her lips and a green for her eyelids. I wanted the main focus of her face to be her eyes. With a watercolor pencil, I sketched on the shape and placement of her eyes and eyebrows. I try to add white with each layer of the eyes. It takes a few layers to become opaque. I continued darkening the eye color, eyeshadow, and the brows. With a black pencil, I added some eyeliner. Don't forget to add the tear ducts and waterline. This really brings some life and dimension to the eyes. Using my white pencil again, I added highlights to her face, then blended them out with a cotton swab. With some small brushes and acrylic paint, I decided to add on a little more detail to the eyes and darken the pupils. Add reflections and a little bit of gloss varnish, and her face is done. With the face done, I added on the wig to the head. This is where I noticed that the braids were a bit too bulky. So I removed them and cut a little bit of bangs to frame her face. I added the head back onto the body and finished her with a few accessories. I think she's enchanting. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe down below. Also, don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you'll be notified when I post a video next week. Thanks for watching!